Welcome back to our study in the book of Esther. The theme of this book is renewing of faith, not just a personal faith, but rebirthing, renewing of faith within a nation. We are already to chapter 6, and the theme of this chapter is Haman humbled. The key verse of the entire book is in chapter 4, verse 14. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. This was said to Esther as she had become the queen of Persia with actually Xerxes, and he in the Bible was Ahasuerus, and there have been problems arise and a plot to destroy all of the Jews. And so Esther is mentioned this when she just says, what can I do? Why is this happening to me? And this question was asked to her as basically a statement. God has put you in this position for a reason. All right, let's get into our chapter today. We have already covered chapters 1 and 2, the Feast of Ahasuerus. Now we're into the areas of the Feast of Esther. And what has happened in chapters 3, 4, and 5 previously to this is that in chapter 3, the king makes Haman basically the number 2 guy in the kingdom. And he is given all sorts of things and position and power and told people that they are under him. But there is a Jew, Mordecai, relative of Esther, and Esther is queen, that checks on her and watches and gives her advice almost daily. And Haman does not like him. In fact, Haman hates him. And so over the chapters here in chapter 3 and then 4, Mordecai will not bow down to him. By the way, was not required to bow down in front of Haman. That was only to the king and the queen. So that was never required, but he had everybody else doing it, and Mordecai just threw more gasoline on the fire of hatred in his heart. And so Haman comes up with this idea, and he goes before the king, and he says, with all the countries that we have conquered, and we've brought people back here to serve you and to be part of the main kingdom here, there is a nation that does not believe like us, and that they are rising up to destroy you and to take the kingdom. Well, Haman was right in the first things that he said, but totally lying in the ones after. And so the setup, a proclamation was made and a date set for all of the Jews to be killed, all throughout the kingdom, and the word went out. And so in chapter 5, there is great mourning by the Jews, by Mordecai and by Esther. And so Esther is told, you need to go in and see the king. Tell him what's going on. And she says, it could cost me my life. And he said, it's going to cost you your life anyway. You can either die in front of the king or die when the king's men come for you. So let's get into chapter 6 with that background. Here is the Persian kingdom and the trade routes, especially back to Jerusalem and the returns. And Esther, the entire book, wedges in between Ezra, and then the entire book of Nehemiah comes up. And today, Haman's humbled, Mordecai's forgotten benevolence. Oh, our villain. On that night, could not the king sleep? And he commanded to bring the book, or a document, a missive, of records of the chronicles, And the Persians kept ancient, wonderful, excellent records. And they were read before the king. Just a question that came up that I thought about, maybe to try to get to sleep, he decided, let me read. And what he's going to read about is what Esther said way back yonder. Remember, Haman has said really bad things about the Jews when Esther has spoken and set up this banquet for Haman and the king to come to. And so the king's going to do some studying. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on King Ahasuerus. Our book opened with this story. There was an assassination attempt. And the king said, what honor and dignity or greatness has been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. He was never rewarded for saving the king's life. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house, to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman stands in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor? So the king just asks him a question. It says, someone that I really think that I owe somebody something, someone that I want to honor, that did something great for me, what should I give them? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than myself? And the word delight in the Hebrew is take pleasure. It can only be me. So he thought. Haman actually was not really after power or money. He had this. Haman did want, and what he did want, was the glory and the honor and the splendor of royalty. He wanted to wear the clothing. He wanted the parades. He basically wanted the crown, but knew he couldn't get it. But who knows what he would thought down the road. So that's what he was after. He wanted everybody to know who he was. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king used to wear, and the horse that the king rides upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delights to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as you have said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sits at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that you have spoken. Ha ha! Wow! Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him. He had to walk before him, declaring who he was and how wonderful Mordecai was. Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, he was, before whom you have begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail. You're not going to have power against him, but shalt surely fall before him. The word befallen up above, the friends, everything that had befallen him that had met up with him. And so they're starting to see the pendulum turn. And what's interesting, the king does not know at this point what Haman has plotted for Mordecai to hang him. But he does know that there's a death sentence upon all the Jews. But Esther the Lord is moving. And so we come to 14, the very last verse in the chapter again. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. So it's time to eat. And while the pipers play in the banquet, there's going to be one paid. The bottom is beginning to fall out from under Haman, and he is beginning to know it. And so hang in there. We're coming to the next chapter in our next session. This is going to wrap it up. It's a wonderful way to see how God is working in the lives of people that are lost and do not know Jehovah God, and people that do. And so, renewing your faith, there's 5 things you should know before we close this chapter out. Just think about these. When all seems lost, it isn't. When no one seems to notice, they do. When everything seems great, it's not. And when nothing seems just, it is. And when God seems absent, he isn't. What great 5 principles to leave with you today. Thank you for listening and watching this video. I trust it'll be a blessing to you. If I can help you in any way, these are taught live to a Bible class. And there is a hard copy, a Word document. I'll be glad to send it to you. Just email me, and it'll be sent back to you free of charge. And here's my royal roll of resources.